Minister, the PARMA is a statutory agreement under the Threatened Species Act 1995. That act is administered by you. Section 31 gives the Secretary the power to sign off on a PARMA, and the PARMA will be between Dipipui and Sustainable Timbers Tasmania. So, Minister, this is firmly under your jurisdiction. Can you please tell me, will you please table the maps that identify where the 9,300 hectares that are being considered in the PTPZ land are located with the geocoordinates?
I'm just going to ask Ms Wilson to, we were going to come back and acknowledge that, because it's important to see this as a step process as to when I have that involvement. Because the Forest Practices Authority, of course, is not in my purview, but if Ms Wilson can explain that to the committee, I'd be grateful.
Through the Minister, and the member is correct. A PARMA is made under Section 31 of the Threatened Species Protection Act. It is an agreement between the Secretary and a public authority, or the Secretary's delegate in this case. A public authority can be Sustainable Timbers, but we've also had PARMAs which have been highly successful. For example, with Hydro Tasmania, where we have provided certainty in the day-to-day operations around the Yeninga and Great Lake area. So they've proven to be very effective ways to manage threatened species. The agreement can specify its purposes and aims and its functions. So STT, as you indicate, is a public authority, and they have sought to make a PARMA under Section 31, and we are supportive of this. They're consulting with Dipipui, and I've been engaged as the Deputy Secretary in recent times. In terms of, you asked about consultation, I have reference to my notes. They have consulted in terms of developing the mapping model. I am informed, and they've, for example, spoken to researchers such as the Difficult Bird Research Group, and have provided briefings to stakeholders. Now, that's their process. It is not our process. But to be clear, that is but it's my understanding that STT have engaged with stakeholders at least to this point. STT, as I indicated, are still are pulling together some additional information for the FPA board, as is appropriate. They have yet to finalise a draft for my consideration. At that point, the PARMA can be made. As I've already indicated, we've not yet had any discussions around what the next stages are in regards to the PARMA and in terms of further consultation. That's because it is not, because of where it is in the process, and I think that we will continue to work in a cooperative sense with STT as they develop the PARMA.
Well, Minister, thank you for the Deputy Secretary's response. She didn't answer the question. Perhaps you or someone else can. Could you table the areas that are being considered for exclusion? To be clear, the plan identifies 9,300 hectares to be excluded out of a total of 24,000 hectares of swift parrot breeding habitat that is existing across the permanent timber production zone. So of a total of 24,000 hectares, 3,000 hectares have been identified to be excluded. So we would like to understand where those hectares are and what the advice you have for why they have been chosen and why others have been excluded.
As Ms Wilson has advised, it's in draft, and I can't release a draft document at this point in time. So we've just explained to you that process certainly hasn't got to the stages where we're in a position to release that.
Well, can I say that it's at the final stages of approval? That's what your website says, final stages of approval. At what point will people who are concerned about the protection of this species get to have
that, Chair.
any transparency over what you are doing
I've
with
just
publicly owned lands?
Explain to Dr. Woodruff.
Well, you've explained that you're never going to release it. Will you release the information?
Excuse me, Dr. Woodruff. I did not say that we would never release it. I said it is currently in draft form. Don't take words out of context. Even when I'm very specific with my words, you choose to hear it a different way because it's not what you want to hear. It is a draft document in draft form. It is not appropriate to release it at this point in time. At this point in time.
Will you be releasing it before you approve it?
Well, we obviously need to consider a final document. Ms Wilson.
The approval sits with the secretarial delegate, and I believe I've indicated that it's in draft form, and as has the minister indicated. At this stage, it's a draft PAMA, and that's where it is at.
I'm still trying to get an answer to the question. Will you be releasing the information when it is in the final draft stage before an approval is made so that people can have a look at it and understand the basis for the decision that has been made?
There is a process to go through.
I'm acknowledging your process.
We need to consider a draft. We need to consider a final before we get to that stage.
But will
It's
other
not
people...
the answer she wants to hear
but
at this
will
point in
other
time.
people, anyone else, get to have a look at it and have a say about it before you approve it, Minister, or your delegate?
I think we've been very clear in
No,
what
you
our
haven't
position
answered this
is.
question. So does that mean that the remaining 14,700 hectares of breeding habitat in the permanent timber
say
production zone
decision for
excuse me, Minister,
The
could I
Secretary's...
finish the question? Does that mean that the other 14,700 hectares in the permanent timber production zone of swift parrot identified habitat will be logged, since that is not to be excluded?
Chair.
Yes or no is a simple answer that
Chair,
I'm looking for.
Ms Wilson has explained the process and her authority that she's provided as the Secretary's designate to approve or not those plans. They're currently in draft. We're not in a position to advance that further.
I'm not talking about the Palmer. I'm talking about the rest of the land. Minister, I'm not talking about the Palmer now. I'm talking about the rest of the land that the Palmer will not relate to.
Yep. So any areas that were available for production forests, and I'm not an expert in production forests, our interest is in threatened species and its appropriate management. But if an area was available under the appropriate legislation for forest production, there'd still be a requirement, and it currently is a requirement, for a forest practices plan. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
So the other 14,700 hectares of swift parrot habitat will
questions,
be
Chair?
available for logging.
I was talking in principal terms, but if...
Sorry?
Hang on, we've got a distracted chair here.
Right.
There's a problem.
Hansard.
Just having trouble with microphones. So just be aware to speak into the microphones. And again, as far as Hansard goes, please don't interject on each other because it's very difficult for me to hear here. And so please, and so speak into the microphones.
Sorry. He wasn't speaking to the microphone.
Right. Yes. Ms. Standen.